As a leader, how would you deal with the people that disagree with you, people that don't like you? How would you deal with them?
When the Archbishop called me, I remember that time, he asked me, are you a strong leader or are you a hard leader? Do you have a strong heart or do you have a hard heart? I said, what's the difference?
I know you receive a lot of thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. When you go back home and reflect on the thank you, how do they make you feel like?
Many people are clapping. I like how a certain preacher says it. He says people are clapping for what they can get through you. When I won the VP position, I had more than 1,000 congratulations that night. More than 1,000 congratulations that night. 2 years later, I stood for presidency and lost. I had 3 calls that night.
Wow.
3 calls and no text message.
Well, before we dive into today's episode of the Leaders Podcast, People, Purpose, and Progress, I would like to invite you to subscribe to this channel and also click on that notification bell. But why should you do this? 1, I would like to invite you to the family of honest, trustworthy, and reliable people, a family of leaders, a family of goal setters. Today's episode is going to be quite amazing. Our guest is a unique one. You know, she reminds us of a story of some birds which are not supposed to be caged because their feathers are too bright, and when they fly away, the other part of you that makes you think that was a sin to lock them up starts to rejoice. Counsel Diana Angwech.
This is very interesting. That's a very interesting introduction, a non-caged bird.
You're one of those birds.
I am.
It's a pleasure to have you on the Leaders Podcast.
Thank
People,
you.
Purpose, and Progress.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. The caliber of people I've seen you host, I wondered why I was getting an opportunity to be on this podcast.
You know why?
I was very amazed.
Hey, you know why? Probably you fetch your wisdom from the same source.
Oh my gosh. No, but it's good to be here. It's good to be challenged, and I think it's a good challenge.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I read your LinkedIn profile. I've not known much of your story, but according to the things you're doing, they remind of us of Jeremiah 17:3. It says, blessed are those that believe and trust in the Lord, because they are like those trees which are planted at the riverbank. And their roots penetrate deep down into the waters, and they are never worried about the long drought.
They are green all the time.
And their job is to produce fruits and fruits and fruits and fruits.
Yeah.
Counsel Diana Angwech, you're doing quite a number of things. 1, for those of you who are watching this, you are the former Vice President, Uganda Law Society. You are the Chancellor, Church of Uganda. You sit on the committee which heads the National Stadium, Nambole. You are the leader of Alabaster, a women organization or group where you mentor them.
Yeah.
And it's also affiliated to All Saints Cathedral. Yeah. Not only that, you are the chairperson of Abide Family Group, which is an NGO in the East. Wow.
I think I should stop updating my LinkedIn profile. That's what you're saying.
Do you ever pinch yourself?
For those positions? No, I don't. In heaven, I do. On earth, I don't. Specifically, some of them have come at a very interesting period of my life. They speak to the season in my life. I remember, especially in Mandela National Stadium, at that time I was going through a phase where I just needed a reminder from God that He had not forgotten me and that I still mattered. And I remember that day crying out to God and saying, is there no oasis in this desert? Is there no consolation?
It was at that moment.
It was at that moment. And just the next day, I received the appointment from one of the highest officers in the land. And I remember smiling. I didn't tell anyone. I specifically didn't tell my family. They found out a month later when the news broke the appointments. But every one of them, I think, came from one, walking with God. I did not pitch for chancellor either. I never
You're kidding
thought.
me.
No, I never thought. First of all, we've never had a woman in that position. And then we've never had an unmarried person in that position. And so those are two things that were working against me, definitely. So it never ever crossed my mind that I'd be eligible.
Didn't even apply?
Not at all. It's an appointment by the Archbishop and the Synod. And so you don't apply for these positions because you don't even meet the cut.
Why do you think you were appointed?
Jesus, I think that every appointment is a reason, it's something that God wants to deal with in your life first, and also the season that the people who are involved in are going through. And I have found that walking in these positions, while God is stretching me in areas I didn't expect, stretching me and causing me to learn wisdom from those who have gone before me, to learn the art of dealing with people in their various capacities, to learn how to navigate the idea of politics in places where you are absolutely a volunteer and you're not quite in the system. How then do you deal with it? How do you balance becoming a person of influence? Because you're not the board chair, but you are a member. If you want a decision to go through, how do you navigate that? And that's where your leadership skill is proved, because you have to influence.
This is going to be a great conversation, and allow us sit at your feet and sip all this wisdom, because it takes a lot. But allow me take you back in memory a little bit. Let's get to try to understand who Council Diana Angwech is. Is there any memory that maybe during your childhood that speaks to who you are today?
Wow, that's an interesting question. In P1, when there's a question that used to come to everybody in P1, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? And I had no idea who I wanted to be. And so I'd wait for my neighbor to answer, and then I'd answer. And everybody's answer was within doctor, engineer, pilot. And so I said what everybody said. I said doctor, said engineer, I said pilot, I said all those things. But when they asked me if I was alone, what I wanted to be, my answer was vice president, first lady. Those were my answers. And so going back to as far back as then, I said what everybody said because I didn't know that it was possible to be anything else. But when you ask a child that question, listen to the answers. Don't listen to the final answer where somebody says doctor, pilot. If my parents had listened, or anybody around me had listened, the similarity between vice president, first lady, speaker, that was a leadership call. What the child was simply saying is that there's leadership beating on the inside of me that wants to come out. I don't know how to navigate it. And I don't even understand it. But there's a pull on the inside of me that wants me to get to that level. And so when I looked back many years later and differentiated between what I said because of people and what I said when I was alone, I realized for a long time there was a seed that was planted at the beginning of time that leadership would be the call. And those positions are forefront leadership. They're not back positions. They're positions that also determine policy in nations. They're decisions that determine and influence national movements. And so you realize that God has put something on the inside of you that is beating towards a certain place. A very good mentor would pick up on that. Don't mind that they keep changing the answer. Look for the similarity in the answer. It will tell you what God has planted. It will show you the dream that God wants to nurture. Because when I went through primary, I shied away from leadership. I refused, because in my view, leaders were hated. They were very tough, and nobody was their friend. So it also showed me that inside there was an insecurity that needed to be healed.
Within you?
Yes. And so because of that insecurity, it meant that I had a low self-esteem. It meant that I was dealing with the idea of being liked, because I had placed being liked above leadership. And so if a good mentor looked at it, then they would begin to speak to those insecurities.
But the seed was already in there.
The seed was planted by God. It comes with the package. It came with the package. Now all God needed to do was put people in my path to shape it and bring it out. And so I had a primary teacher then who Mr. Batwal, I have no idea where he is. I hope that...
Glad you even remember your primary teachers.
Because he made a fundamental difference in my life. He's the one person that held my hand and took me to the staff room and said, this girl is going to be a prefect. I freaked out. Around that time, I even thought I was being punished because I'd grown up with boys that was very rough. So I'd thrown a child down and their lip had split. And so I thought I was going to be punished. But what the teacher had seen in that roughness, in that stone that wasn't quite shaped, was a leadership gift. And he was trying to bring it to the forefront.
He got connected to the seed.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so he decided that I was going to become a prefect, which I did the next year. I became a prefect. And then I had them later on talk. She can't campaign for the highest position because she's still afraid. And so by the time I was going into P7, there were other people who could take the position. I went into high school, and now my classmates and housemates began to spot the gift. Every time there was a decision to be made, and I remember we got locked up in a room sometime and we couldn't get out, and the house mistress came to get us out, and they asked, is there one responsible person in there that you can trust? And everybody automatically said Diana.
Really?
And so I thought, they see something in me
That's
I
an
don't
unincalculable
see.
favor. Wow.
This is something in me I don't see. And so that's what happened. And so over the years, God just put people in my space to show me that there was leadership. And eventually in church, where the seed was finally watered, that's the place where leadership began for me.
What picture did your parents see? Did they see what they are seeing today?
My parents were busy working and trying to make a living. I can guarantee you none of my parents thought I'd be at the forefront leading.
Really?
No, they didn't.
What picture did they have? What were they seeing? Or what were they nurturing?
You see, our parents were born at a time where it was about make a better life for your children than you had had. And so they didn't have time to figure out your purpose, your gift, your different things. Theirs was to give you an education, do right by you. You have a right to education, you have a right to water, you have a right to a house, you have a right to electricity. That's what your parents give you.
Education will decide.
Education will decide.
Interesting.
And perhaps because I was very vocal, lawyer is what they saw. And so they thought, she actually wants to be a lawyer. Why not? Let's look at it. Let's go that far. It's very interesting because as a young child, you have a bit of impediments that parents sometimes worry about. My mom tells the story a lot. I used to draw. You know, in primary P1, you draw a picture. And so she said that I would draw a jar and put the handle, the opposite side, like as if I was looking into a mirror. And she got so worried, she cried. She cried because in her mind, I would not amount to much. So
what a story. Interesting.
I wouldn't amount to much. And so what they gave the basics for me to get to school. And that put me in the path of people who could see what they couldn't. In their own way, perhaps they did. Maybe by culture, by putting the first girl at the front to lead the house, to do all those different things. But the true gift was nurtured by teachers, by church elders, and eventually by spiritual parents along the way.
So now, how did you know that, okay, now my purpose is calling?
So we confuse purpose and platform. And purpose and platform are two different things. A lot of what God gives us is called platform. It's not what purpose is. When God makes you a pastor, that may not be that's not your purpose. That may be a platform God has given you.
A platform.
A platform God has given you. Platform is the stage that God creates for you to become who He wants you to become.
To be.
Yeah. And so a lot of all the positions I hold are just training positions. They're training me to nurture that God intends to the final end. So in many ways, they are the slave in Potiphar's house.
Slaves in Potiphar's house.
They are the prisoner in the Pharaoh's prison, because there's a prime minister still coming. We're not yet there. Eventually, Joseph's purpose was not to be prime minister. His purpose was to save the nations.
True.
To save the nations.
True.
When we get into positions and we get lost in those positions, we're confusing purpose and platform. And we need to understand that. And so being a board member in the various boards, I think I sit on about 6 boards, a board member in about 6 boards, being all these different things that God has given, are merely a platform for God to introduce what he wants to do. But in that moment is what you call training. You see, purpose for me from the very beginning has always been leadership. To the very core, it's leadership. Why? Because leadership has to have a purpose. I believe that God wants to influence a nation. God wants to speak back into a nation. Like Deborah, there's going to come a time, and there will definitely will be a time. When I was in Makerere, when I was in university, whenever they prayed over me, one of the things they kept praying was Deborah. And a lot of words were spoken in that aspect. And so Deborah was not just a judge, a wife, a mother, and a warrior. All those were platforms to deliver Israel. The intended purpose for all those is to deliver Israel.
Where do you place yourself? We are traveling, we are moving from Egypt, we want to cross to Canaan.
I believe that.
Where do you place yourself?
I believe that there is a time that's going to come where we are absolutely influencing the policy over this nation. I think the intended purpose of all this is to influence the nation for the kingdom.
So which of your responsibilities serves deepest to your purpose?
All of them play a role. At the end of the year, I like to look at all of them. And I look at them in the form of the aspects of the 7 mountains of influence. When I divide them in the 7 mountains of influence, they exist in 5 of the 7 mountains of influence. And so in religion, I'm present. In sports, I'm present. In, in matters of entertainment, I'm present. If you look at all of them, you begin to divide them into mountains of influence. When you look at them in terms of mountains of influence, I have not stepped into the one that I believe that God has called me to. And so that means I can't stop. It means I have something to learn from the mountain of religion. It means I have something to learn from the mountain of family. When you speak about abide is about placing children who are not in homes. So rather, we are trying to avoid people giving their children out for adoption, because Ginger had become a hub for that, and to allow mothers be economically empowered in order to cater for their children. That's a mountain of influence that regards family. And so in all those mountains of influence that God has put me on, I believe that what he wants to do is to make me learn. None of them has yet pointed or has allowed me to step into the one that is actually ordained.
Is there a moment where you have ever doubted your faith?
In God? Every time, yes, of course. I think that if you never go through that phase, you'll never be convinced about what you're convinced about.
What happened?
Oh my.
What happened?
Many things. I think that I remember very clearly that I had learned to do ministry and neglected relationship. Campus teaches you a lot about ministry, at least our time it did. It teaches you a lot about ministry and throws you into ministry. And before you know it, you are demonstrating the manifestation of the gifts of God. You are growing up and everyone is distributing the roles in the 5-fold ministry. You are ever being called a prophet, apostle, all these things, evangelist, teacher. And it seems to be a garment that everybody is putting on you. And it has a lot to do with ministry. But nobody talks about relationship, not in our time. And so there was never personal Bible study, personal prayer time, personal anything to build and cultivate a relationship with God. And we flowed the way we were because we're constantly in each other's spaces. The problem with that model is that you will feel used by God. And so I got to one of those places where I honestly felt used and dumped by God.
By God.
And so I sat outside a church one time telling God, you used me.
How do you define being used?
I think I felt that there was no relationship between us. I didn't feel that God cared for me as a person. I felt that the things that were very personal to me were at the back end of God.
So in a nutshell, there was no fulfillment. You didn't feel fulfilled.
In many ways, yes, but more, there was an emptiness. Because with ministry, you can run and do it 1,000 times. But if it never flows from a place of relationship, what you're really doing is just a motor. You are running. You'll be the kind of people that will fulfill the scripture that says, I drove out demons, I did all these things. And the Lord says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Why? Because we're so big on gifts and all those things, but there's no connection that grows with the vine. There's no connection. And so on the inside of me, I began to feel emptiness. Emptiness. And I felt that you've got me to speak to your children. You've got me to minister to your children. But I don't matter. I don't feel like I matter in the grand scheme of things.
I think we've all been there before.
Exactly.
I think, I've been there.
Yeah. And so
that moment where you feel like,
Yeah.
is it really worth it?
Yeah. And so in the end, what happened for me is that I began to question whether I still wanted to be in the faith. Because I said, no, God is a user. So I began to question why I still wanted to be in the faith.
How did you come back?
What God does, God is a lover. He's a real
And he's
lover. He's a lover. He's love. You're right. And he's a lover. He pursues. God really pursues. He knows when to be gentle and when to be tough. And this time he knew that if he approached me in a gentle manner and spoke to the real problem, and I could find out the problem and agree with him, then I would be able to turn around. And what God did was speak to me gently and saying, I never asked you to do any of those things for me. You chose. I never asked you to get up and do those things. You said yes to the call.
You remind me, when I was little, I grew up in a family where our parents were struggling.
Yeah.
We could see them struggle.
Yeah.
And I grew up saying that, God, may you use me as a backbone, because I used to hear those prayers.
That's the dangerous prayer.
Use me as a backbone
Oh my God.
to change my family.
Oh my God.
Now, recently, a responsibility comes. And being a firstborn, of course, I have to grow up and be a man.
Yeah.
I am married. And my parents look at me like, hey, we can rely on him. We can now have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
So something strange hits home.
You're the
And
one
one
they
time I
call.
tell my wife, I'm like, you know what? When we jumped in to help, one time I told her, you know what? Do you know I used to pray that may God use me as a backbone to save my family.
Yeah.
And I'm now busy helping them.
Yeah.
Let's get back to you, Council Diana. You see the responsibilities you have around you.
Yeah.
There's a saying that it's not easy to please everybody. And it's not a must that everybody is going to like you. As a leader, how would you deal with the people that disagree with you? People that don't like you? How would you deal with them?
I start with don't like. I served as the youth chair of All Saints Cathedral, the first female and only female to date. And I don't think I was emotionally prepared for the position. And I didn't have mentors per se who could hold my hand. But I commend His Grace, Henry Lukorombi. I remember that time when I was struggling. There's a transition between having a new youth pastor and myself, and we began to contradict. We were clashing a lot. And he called us and sat us down. And he taught me an important lesson. He said to me, before that lesson actually, I used to organize a lot of youth camp then. And the amount of work it took to get a youth camp was impossible. You would shop for the items. We're talking about over 500 people. You're shopping for the items. Please note that you're also 23, 24. You're shopping for the items. You're catering for them spiritually. You're dealing with service providers at a high level. You're dealing with the buses that are taking people to the campsite. You're dealing with the food. I was dealing with service providers. I was dealing with the spiritual aspect. I was dealing with the program. For a 24-year-old, that was quite some work.
True.
And I didn't have, my time, there was a transition between the youth pastors. And I remember I thought to myself that I've really laid my life down for these people. And we got to camp, and some people decided that they were going to be disobedient. Now, by nature, I'm very choleric. I don't tolerate incompetence at any level. And so the choleric part of me really came out. And I began to shout, to bark, to do all these things. It was also born from the fact that I was very frustrated, as carrying too much, as carrying too much for such a young age, and there was no substantial support to do what I was doing. But because I had shown that I could, the reverends let me do it, right? And so at the end, I was so frustrated. The things that I tried to introduce, walking around the campsite to understand it, out of the campsite. That evening, a song was made about me, the Diana walk and back and forth. To see them still hold it as a culture to date, I looked at them with very bad eyes. But I was very disappointed. I remember coming back from camp, and I received hate mail. I received hate mail, and I just said, water over ducks back. I don't care about your opinion. You don't matter to me enough for me to cater for your opinion. But the truth is that stung. What they said stung. And I came from a place where I was saying, I've laid down my life. Why don't they see the sacrifice
you've made?
I have made. And why don't they appreciate it? No one taught me that that's what leadership is. You will lay down your life, and people are not going to see the sacrifice. But they're going to do what they want to do.
True.
And so when the Archbishop called me, I remember that time, he asked me, are you a strong leader or are you a hard leader? Do you have a strong heart or do you have a hard heart? I said, what's the difference?
That's what I was going to ask you. What is the difference?
He said a strong leader can take on what is coming their way and have enough poise, enough grace, enough courage to still deal with it and come out on top. A hard leader blocks everything out because of the pain and the arrows that have come, and answers people in such a way that they don't seem to care, but they are dealing with heart.
Wow. Do you consider that as the best advice you have ever received?
Very many good pieces of advice, but it is the one that stands among the top 5 for me, that stands out, because it shaped how I began to lead.
What did you think after?
I took a pause and I said, oh my God, I have a hard heart. That's the thing about leadership. You fight so many battles that your heart begins to harden. If you don't find a place to empty it, you will harden. It's human nature. I mean, sin hardens the heart. They don't tell you that it's not just your sin, even what others are throwing at you. And if you don't find an outlet, you find that eventually your heart will harden, and you will begin to view everybody as a target or as someone fighting against you. And yet you are called to lead them. It's the trap of the enemy to make sure that you never accomplish everything that you need to do over their lives. So how do you deal with people that don't like you? In that moment, I learned that very important lesson. But I've also learned to keep a small circle around me that tell me the truth, but are gentle enough to know when to tell me the truth. And when it hurts as a leader, I have mentors ahead of me. I call and say, I'm hurting over this matter. This is what happened. Give me perspective. And they do. And so I create an outlet for myself, knowing I'm human enough to take them. And then also to discern the arrows that are coming. There are seasons where those arrows are going to come about people not liking you. The scripture tells you that it's the shield of faith that extinguishes those arrows. And your faith comes by the knowledge of the word of God.
And sometimes those arrows, God sends them to mature you, to become
He allows them. And so it's important that in those moments you have beefed up on the word to understand what is an arrow, what can you take and what can you not take. To the other one where people don't agree with you, that's a very interesting one. It depends on where you are. If you don't have the final say, that's the easier position. Because if you don't have the final say, the buck doesn't stop with you. After you have been at the top and you have the final say, you understand the weight of the fact that the buck stops with you. And so whatever decision you make, you'll answer for it. And so when you're seated in a part of a board, the best you can do in when people don't agree with you is to influence. You will learn a lot by a lot of how to function with people by learning how to deal with them. You'll always find a soft spot in somebody. Try to have a relationship with people before. The relationship doesn't have to be very personal, but do your best to show people you care for them as a person, not for their position. Because if you care for them as a person, they will trust you. And so it's easy for you to influence them to get to a certain position. It's easy for you to say something to them that they can take that you ordinarily wouldn't. And learn not to take credit in certain spaces. Just influence. You will learn that there are key points in particular decision makings. Get to the key points and deal with the key points. Deal with the key people that have the ability to turn and know how to shape it to them. It starts with relationship. When you show them that they matter, not their position.
Wow.
And when you do, you will get them to do what you think is right.
Wow. I am learning. I hope you too, you are learning. The Leaders Podcast, People, Purpose, and Progress. We are still here with the Council, Diana Angwech, and she's sharing a lot of wisdom. Please, let me not lose you. Council, you see, earlier on before we came on air, we were having a conversation about purpose and the plan of God. From you, what you have shared with us here, or with me, it really shows that there was a seed that was planted in you, a seed of leadership, and it shows that God has a plan for you. If you can have the ability to handle all those responsibilities on you, and you still stand strong, man, it means a lot. If that is God's plan, what is your contribution to this plan? And do you have control over that plan?
You see, God has a plan for you. As I said earlier, God has a plan for you because it was ordained before you be. Purpose precedes your existence. There is purposes, and the plan of God precedes your coming to be. Psalm 139 will tell you that even before your unformed substance came to be, in other words, even before you came onto the earth,
He knew you.
That he had a book written about you.
Or a script.
Yes. And so there's a book about Simon from beginning to end. Yeah, he knows the time you'll be born. He knows the time that you are stated to die.
Even you, I think we're going to have a conversation today. Do you think he knew it?
This is what you understand is that the book doesn't have detail in the sense of 1 p.m. he does this, 2 p.m. he does this. No. I don't believe that that's how God works. God's purpose, like he said to Jeremiah, is that I made you a prophet to the nations. What he's saying is I've given you a platform to speak truth to a hard generation. I made you. Jeremiah said, no, I'm young. He said, no, your age doesn't matter to me. I've given you a platform to speak truth to a rebellious generation. And so that's what God expects. Now, you are allowed to be creative in things that are not purpose. But when it comes to purpose, you're not allowed to be creative. There is a small gap for you to be creative in how you do certain things. But when it comes to the path, when it comes to the actual thing God said for you to do, you're not allowed to be creative. So you can be creative in how you go about certain things in life. You can be creative in no, God's not going to decide your hairstyle for you. You're going to decide it yourself. God is not going to decide for you what cloth you're going to wear. God is not going to decide. He may once in a while tell you, he knows what's going to come ahead, and so he says wear that color because he knows the idea that day you probably run into a destiny helper who's going to do something. But God's not going to wake up every day and say wear black, wear this. That's not.
We have
that
the will.
You have the will to do so. What is your participation? Is you have free will. You can agree with God and you can disagree with God. You can agree with what God has written about you in that book, or you can disagree. Sadly, for many of us don't live what God ordained for us to be. You have to understand that man has been given free will, absolute free will to choose whether to choose
life
God
or death.
Exactly. You can
And
choose
he
God.
gave us the advice. Please choose life.
Choose life. He said you can choose it all. You can choose to walk the path I've given you and ordained for you. But if you don't, you can also make your choice, and there are consequences for it. And so when it comes to purpose, what is your participation? Your free will. You agree with God. What does it mean to agree with God? Is to first of all discover and understand his will. And so Romans 12, 1 and 2, but mostly 2, will tell you that do not be conformed to the standards
Things
of this
the
world, but be renewed, but let your mind be renewed that you may understand his good, his pleasing, and his perfect will. It means that coming from the top, you have to sacrifice your life. This life he has given you, he wants it back. Because it says, offer your body as a living sacrifice, holy, pleasing, and acceptable to God. The first way you understand is when you offer yourself as a sacrifice. As long as you walk with God, there will come a time in life when you realize your life is not your own. When you realize when he says jump, you jump.
So what is my contribution then?
So
if
you
that
see,
is his plan.
You see, God's plan for you is perfected in your submission. God's plan for you is perfected, because naturally man is rebellious. In and of us, the scripture says you're wicked from birth.
True.
You're wicked. Your natural inclination is selfishness, is pride, is all these things. God's will is perfect. It's perfect. And so when he's telling you to be the sacrifice, he's scraping away those things that don't look like him. He's scraping away that selfishness, that pride, that vain conceit, that ability to live for yourself alone. And you begin to live for him. When you get to that place, which is a daily place, because Paul tells you, I beat myself daily. And
so we die every day.
Every day. But you see, the death is a choice also. Because Paul says, I beat myself daily and make myself subject to me. What is he saying? I beat my body and I make it subject to my spirit. That after I have run the race, I may not be disqualified. Meaning it's possible to do all these things and be disqualified at the end. So Paul is saying, he's giving you insight into the fact that the sacrifice that you offer up to God is first of all your spiritual act of worship. The highest thing that you can do is worship God, because you become what you worship. The scripture says that they worshipped worthless idols and they became worthless.
But Council Diana, is it an easy journey to walk? Because what you're saying reminds me of a story. There was a young leader who walked to Jesus. He had known all the laws. He had kept the laws holy. And then he walked to Jesus. He said, I'm holy. I understand all the laws and I want to follow you. And Jesus said, can you sell all what you have and follow me? He took off for his life.
I think.
How do you stay motivated?
Back to the other one first. Death is the hardest part for every believer, for every human being. And you will face it. And you don't die once. You will continue dying to self, to your desires, to your pleasure. And so your participation is to offer up your body as a living sacrifice. Because there you understand that you don't live for yourself anymore. You live for God. And then your mind is renewed, because only a renewed mind can understand the will of God. Your participation is now to agree with the will of God.
With the will.
Now, when you agree with the will of God, first of all, you are satisfied, you are happier, there is joy within you, all those things. You may not get all that you want in life, but you have subjected your will. It's the highest form of worship.
But Council, is it a comfortable place?
It will never be, but that's the point, because your natural inclination is to be yourself, have control, have all those things.
I'm sure you have been there.
Everyone.
You have a story, you have a memory.
Oh God, no. I think death moments are one of the hardest moments for every believer. And they don't happen once, like I've said. There are levels to it. You keep dying until you get to that particular place.
Wow. Council, I'm reading a book called The Ikigai. Actually, I got done reading it. It speaks about the Japanese culture.
The Ikigai.
Yes, Ikigai.
Yeah.
I'm sure you read it.
I know the concept and I teach it.
Interesting. Interesting. So there's where they speak of a human being having three characters. Or where you One character, you find yourself, you're attached to the family, and one, you're attached to the friends, and then you are attached to yourself. Is there something that is within you that none of your friends know, none of your family member understands, but it's within yourself that you want to maybe share with us?
Wow, that's a very big one. I don't think so. I am the same all the way through. You know, people in church once went and told my parents, my God, she's very stubborn. My parents said, we know. She's very assertive. My parents said, we know. I think I'm the same all the way through. There is nothing specific that I have that my family doesn't know, that my friends don't know. I'm the same. Leadership call is the same all the way through. And how they interpret it or approach it may be different, but it's the same all the way through.
How do you stay? You see, that speaks to a lot of character when it comes to leadership. As a leader, how do you stay? Like you said, you're all through the same. Amongst all the responsibilities that you have at a Mandela National Stadium, a Church of Uganda, Alabaster, then the NGO in Ginger, you're all the same. You're exhibiting the same leadership style. How do you stay? How do you maintain that character?
I'm very true to my values in life. I defined who I wanted to be. I allowed God to define who I am. And because of that, there are things that I know I can and I can't do, regardless of which position I'm in. The church, after having been in the legal field for a while, if you've tried to purchase land in this country, you know that there are top counter sums, there are under counter sums. If you have tried to do a few legal things here and there that are not direct transactional between you and the client, you will realize that where there's a third party involved, all those things come to play. Now, how do you make money in such a situation?
That's a good question.
It's a very difficult terrain we are living in, and a very sad one for many of us who live in this place. Because we have to practice, and many people come into the profession and just run away because they say, I can't balance my faith with this thing. And they're going to be difficult situations. There will be very difficult situations. It's not just the legal profession. You're going to go into many places where you're going to be asked to do certain things that contradict what you believe. And for me, my value system is set by the Bible and agreed by me. And so
Set
I know
by the Bible and agreed by
me.
you.
I know I'm a person of integrity, so it means I'm the same wherever you find me. You'll never find a different person. I will be the same all the way through. I tried being somebody else, it didn't work for me. I realized I hated that person.
Who was that?
So you know, when you get positions, people tell you, dress a certain way, move a certain way, interact with certain people, don't jump on a border, do all these things. People give you a certain way of life that you're supposed to have. And I tried that way of life, but I wasn't happy in that way of life. And so when the position went and many other positions came and everybody said, no, rise to the position, don't talk to people like that, I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I've tried your way, it didn't work for me. I'm going to do it my way. I will give honor to the position as it comes. When I stand in that position, you can't doubt that I hold the title. But when I don't have to wear the cloak, I'm not going to wear it. I am going to talk to everybody. I'm going to jazz with everyone. I'm going to sit on a border. I'm probably going to do all those things that are different. If it doesn't endanger my life, doesn't endanger somebody else, there's no point in me trying to be somebody else. Simplicity in life will get you far. And so for me, my value system has defined for me a lot about how I stay the way I am. I realized I'm a person of integrity, and two, I value people's words, because you can take my word to the bank. If I give it to you, you can take my word to the bank. And so if I say I'm going to be here at 12, I will be here at 12.
That's true.
If I say I'm going to be here
That's
at
true, by the way. Yes. Our appointment was at midday. Diana Angwech was here. Actually, you were here even before 11:30.
Yes, I was. So this is what God has exalted his word above his name. If there's something that God values, it's his word. A lot of human beings can be taken easily because they don't value their word. You're a politician, you stand up to campaign, you promise things that you can't deliver. But you say it's the way of politics. You come into a room and say and you do things that you can't deliver on, but you say it's the way of politics. If you're a believer, how do you expect the other kingdom to respect your authority when you can't value your word?
Are there people who look at you like you're fierce?
I wouldn't know. You need to ask them. I wouldn't know. You need to ask them. I don't know. That's my answer to that question.
One comment I've gotten from your closest friends, and my wife is one of them. They say, Diana will call you. If you're sick, Diana will call you. She will say, go to the hospital. And she will come, make sure she will call you again. Have you gone to the hospital? And then when you are at the hospital, she will call you and pray with you. Oh my God.
That's a bit much.
Oh my God.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
God.
I don't
Thank
know about
you.
fears.
That's really good. My wife was telling me about the spirit of Jezebel. Do you know that story?
I know Jezebel, yes.
You know Jezebel?
Yes.
How do you...
Not personally, but yes.
You know the story?
Yeah.
How do you avoid from being attacked by the spirit of Jezebel?
That's a very good question. I learned to spot Jezebel in university. I learned to spot that spirit very fast. And everyone in leadership positions, it will keep coming after you, especially in the prophetic. It will keep coming after you. I learned what Jezebel looked like at campus, and so I can spot it from afar. And one of the things that I do, first of all, is keep no open door as much as I can in my life, no open door. Physically, what that looks like is I guard the circle around me. My ministry circle is guarded. You will find that the leaders that are around me are numbered. The leaders around me are numbered. The ones that I choose to invest in are numbered. And so I will pay attention to that circle. And then I'll also tell that circle to pay attention to their circle. Because when the enemy can't get to you, he will go after the people that are forming the circle around you. And so I know that tactic very well. I learned to spot it from afar. God has given me the privilege of having an open eye. And so in dreams, I can tell when I am off course and something is off about my feelings, the way I'm interacting, the way those different things are. So with that spirit, so that spirit, one of the things it likes is to usurp power and use it. You have not dealt with the sexual part. You've not dealt with the abuse of people around you. So there are many facets of it. When I was youth chairperson, it was one of the things that got so close to me. But it was because I didn't have a tight circle around me. They can use that aspect to get close, and it will be manipulated in the sense of they'll manipulate your compassion. I'm going through this, watch over me, this is what's happening. While behind, they're telling people, do this because Diana said. Do this because Diana said. And I think that I've had aspects of that happen to my life. But lately and for a while now, I guard the circle around me jealously. And I tell them to guard, even when I see people get close to them. You know, for me, my very, very fast way to spot you is when you come suddenly and you want to be very close. I don't accept that. I always believe you, and in any ministry you will see it.
Flit back.
Yeah, in any ministry you will see people who just come suddenly and they want to be close to the top person. That's a very big.
That's a person on a mission.
That's a very big. It's a very big tell. It's a very big tell. And so for me, the moment you do that, it's my first.
What's your response
to a person like that? No, I draw back. I draw back very easily. I don't give you access to me. I block all access to me. I'll be compassionate in the sense of, you need this, you need that. Most people come with a prayer request.
How do you know that how do you judge their intentions? Do you think you're blocking out so many good people?
No. First of all, because I believe access to me is a very interesting space. I don't get close to people very fast. I don't necessarily. And also, the older you get, the smaller your circle is going to become. It's so much smaller. The less friends you have, the less time you have to hang out. The friends you have are from secondary school, university. That's it. The work people, let me tell you, a few years after work, it will be done. Yeah, by the time you leave the workspace. So your friends and circle are really small and in between. Wow. And so you need to be very careful about those people. So for situations like that, because I'm in a lot of places to do with ministry, I will listen to what you have to say, probably agree, because sometimes people come with advice. You think this is what has happened, they have seen something happening, so they're going to tell you, listen, let it go, move off. I'm not going to give you sit down, have tea together, do that. No, I will say no. If you want a prayer, we can do it right there and then I'll be going. But access to me is as limited as it can get. Especially, I've seen them try to get, because of the sucker around me, I've seen them try to get to the second layer of people in the ministry, back and forth. Now that's a layer you have to battle with as a leader. So it means that you can teach those people how to cover themselves, but they don't know, they're young, and so you have to fight for them at that level and keep praying that God will open their eyes to see. I think for a leader, one of the things you really need is an open eye in the spirit. Have an open eye. It will save you a lot of problems. Because in your dreams and your visions, even the discernment upon your life can tell you there's something off about this person. Wow. And you're able to respond.
Wow. Well, if you have come this far, that means you're such a leader and you're interested in this conversation. Remember, you're still watching the Leaders Podcast, People, Purpose, and Progress.
Yeah.
Council. Now let's get into our segment, the rapid questions.
Okay.
I know you are counsel, this is not a courtroom. So what you don't feel like answering, you say
pass.
That's how easy
is it. A one-worded answer?
You can tell me a story.
I can tell you a story.
Remember,
that won't be rapid.
That means, we are transforming followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. Through storytelling. Your best childhood memory. What could that be?
Wow, I don't have a clear childhood memory. I liked lights when I was a child. Lights.
You?
Lights. I liked lights.
You liked lights, like visions.
Yeah. And so I think one of my earliest was perhaps my father carrying me to church early in the morning. And the dawn, I don't know if you know the feeling of the dawn in the morning, where the lights are still on. It's not quite bright, but there's a freshness about it. And I remember being carried to church, waking up in the middle of the journey and looking up and seeing the lights and the dawn and going back to sleep. That it's a precious memory for me because it's stored so far back. But it just signifies to me a time of purity, of innocence, of hopes, of dreams, of closeness, of family, and just the light, the dawning of something new.
Interesting. And it's quite a nice, how would you describe your childhood background? Because man, if you're dawned by the light in the morning, that's a good neighborhood. How do you describe it?
My childhood was fun. I think, we grew up with an extended family. There was everybody and anybody. You had parents, siblings, both father and mother living in the house. You had cousins living in the house. You had cousins of the cousins living in the house. We were typical extended family that was in the house. And so there was no time for specific needs of anybody. I was a tattletale. I could tell on everybody. And then I grew up with a lot of boys, so I was a tattletale on everybody. But I felt that then my parents gave us everything that we needed. I think we went to some of the best schools. And we never were once chased for school fees.
Wow.
To go home. And yet when my mother looks back, she has a different story. And so you realize a child's perspective and an adult's perspective are different. My parents felt like they were struggling through just to make it. I didn't feel that burden because we were in good schools. We never lacked meal. I never liked eating, but we never lacked a meal. But then again, the compound was a garden.
So when you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see?
I see a very confident, God-fearing, absolutely bold leader, and somebody who will change the world for the kingdom.
If all what you have God takes right now, what would you do?
I'd be going home to him. If it's over, it's over. I'd be going home to him.
You run back to him.
I'd be going home to him. I mean, if he takes everything, it will be including my life. I'd be going home to him.
Let's speak to Job. You live the story of Job.
Yeah.
What you have, he has had a conversation with Satan.
No.
Take all but spare his
Job's
life.
Yeah.
What would you do?
I think that you can't answer that question until you're in that position. If anyone answers it before that position, they're lying.
Really?
You're lying. We say all these things to God in a moment of exquisite worship. Take all my life, let it be. Take everything that I am. When God takes a child, your faith can be shaken. When God takes a job, when God takes a parent, when life as you know it doesn't appear, you don't know what will happen. Only God does. And so to answer that question in this point in my life would be a lie. All I can pray for is that God would give me the grace to hold on, to stand, and to love him still.
What was the best advice you've ever gotten from your parents?
From my parents? Jesus. I hope you weren't going to limit it to that. But all right, the best advice I've got from I'm really trying to think about it, about the advice I've received from my parents. Mine is, I don't know if it's advice, but it was a joke that my father made. He was asking for change that he needed. And then he asked me if I had change. And I said to him, the money I have is less than yours. And he looked at me with my smart mouth and said, will it ever be more than mine? And I remember that moment because it wasn't just about the money, but a point had been made. No matter how big you become, you'll never be more than me, in the sense that I will always be your father.
Wow.
There are places of authority. You may hold bigger positions. You may have more property.
Wow.
You may do all
That
those
was
things.
deep.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was my interpretation of the situation. You will never be more than the sort of root that brought you.
You really seem so deeply rooted. You're unshakable. The more the wind blows, the stronger the roots become. Amazing. You know, me, I remember when we were growing up, my dad always made a statement, but I didn't know what he meant until I grew up. He always said, I'm taking you to these schools. I went to Luwiri SS from senior 1 up to senior 6. He said, he used to tell us that I'm taking you to these schools. Go and make your friends. That's when I would see my parents struggle. My sister was at Mengo SS. I'm at Luwiri SS. I have another brother at Bulova SS. So you can imagine how much. And we have little ones who are still in primary. So he always said, you go and make friends in those big schools. Then I will go and hustle to get the money. But make sure those will be your family. So 3 years ago, we lost a relative. And all the condolences was taken away. And then my dad was left with a bill to pay. Eventually, we ended up paying the bill. Then, last year, we lost another relative. So when I went there, I asked my dad, who is handling the condolences this time around? I saw it was my elder brother, my elder stepbrother. And he's the one writing and handling the money. Then I told my dad, you know what? Find one of the born-again friends from one of your friends. Let him go and handle the money because for him he's neutral. And then I told my elder brother, just write the names of people who have given the money, but let this gentleman hold the money. And I was the first person to give. So we collected what he had gotten, and also I started a new page. So at the end of the day, we had to sort all the bills, and there was some extra. So when I was coming back, I called him and he told me, hey, people here are happy, but others are not happy because they felt like I stepped on their feet. And then I told him, but you know what?
Yeah.
When you were going to school, you told us we go and make friends.
Yeah.
The friends I meant reason like that. That it's only a fool that makes the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
Last time we made a mistake and we ended up paying the bills.
It's a good word.
So this time around, we had not to lose any money.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's good. So the friends I met think like Council Diana.
Wow.
Anyway, do you have any regrets?
Everybody does. I regret friendships.
Why?
I regret certain friendships. I regret giving certain people access to my life.
Mm-hmm.
I regret what? And when I say it, I mean I wish it would not have happened. I wish I'd learned that lesson another way. Because the things that you regret hurt you deeply emotionally in ways that sort of become scars in your life. And the amount of time it takes to heal from them is immense. And time is the greatest asset that can be stolen from you. You can recover property, you can recover things, but time, only God can restore time.
True.
And so because of certain interactions, time was taken. A lot of healing, a lot of coming through, a lot of decisions made that affect and continue to affect. And so for me, those are the things that I regret. I honestly wish I'd learned the lesson another way. I'm sure because all of us will have lessons to learn. And I know most people say I don't regret because I learned from it. No, I wish it had not happened. But it did. But it also showed me a version of God that there is nothing he can't restore. There's nothing he can't restore. There's nothing he can't redeem. And there is nothing that he can't make whole again. And so I think for me, those are areas in my life I look back and I'm just like, when I think about it, I have just a feeling that maybe heaven will make it better. But it's just one of those things where there's when you invest so much and it's all taken away, it's a difficult place to be.
Earlier on in our conversation, you said that you're not married.
No.
You're holding a couple of responsibilities and you're dealing with so many people. How would you deal with the temptations of men, not only one?
Oh my God, it's one. Wow, that is a very big question. One, I've gotten, I think the older you grow, the more you decide what you really want out of life. There will be an age where panic comes through, especially as a girl. And I think for me, I had that panic between 31 and 34. In those moments, those were the worst years of panic I have ever been through. And in that moment, you're still trying to hold on to what God wants, but you're still trying to open doors that God does not open. And I think I went through trying to open doors that God never opened, and getting really burnt from them and realizing this is not what I want and this is not who I want to be. And because it cost so much time and so much energy and the cost was higher than I was willing to pay, I made up my mind that I'm not going to be that person. And so I think, especially as a girl, when you get into spaces, whether it's media, it's positions and everything, first of all, for me, the natural inclination is that people fear me. Especially people are intimidated by it. I was at church the other day, and one of the gentlemen at church said, the problem with you is your titles are many. You need to but I've had that since I was 20-something.
How did comments like that make you feel?
Water off a duck's back.
Really?
I had that when I was 22. I walked into an interview. I was driving my parents' car. It was a Prado. People feared at that moment. What was I going to... when I was 20 something, I was told to come down. I was driving my first car when I was in school because my parents gave it to me. I was told to come down. I was given a lot in life that people didn't ordinarily have or had to work hard for. And because of privilege, it's not extreme because other people have had real privilege. Mine has been cartoon privilege. It's been very little privilege. And because of that, people have viewed me in a certain way. I decided never to lower myself to make people feel comfortable.
You refused?
I refused. I cannot, because you're asking me to be something I am not. You're asking me to be less so that you can be more. No, you need to rise to it. And I don't say that from a place of pride. I say that from someone who has understood the world a bit more.
No, I think it's because you have gold, and they say gold attracts gold.
Yeah.
Silver attracts silver. Probably you are attracting a lot of silver, and they are repelling.
Yeah.
But I pray one day you will attract gold.
Oh my God! Wow!
Should we send it as a
one
prayer?
way to, Amen. Can I disagree? Let the will of God be done.
Well, now we are almost coming to the end of this conversation. But we have some natural vices within us.
Natural?
Vices.
Yeah.
Like we are all born jealous. We are born envious. Last time I was asking a friend that, look, how does one become a witch? We are not born a witch.
Some people are.
I don't think.
They are.
Just like the late Nelson Mandela put it right. That no one was born hating the other.
Yeah.
People just learn how to hate.
Yeah.
So meaning they can also learn how to love.
Yeah.
But how do you control yourself
University.
not to be jealous, not to be envious of other people? Remember, you're so ambitious. How do you control yourself?
I think God has beaten certain things out of me. He has really beaten certain things out of me. In high school, I used to have close friends. But if you're my close friend, and I find you talking to another close friend, I would not speak to you again.
You felt jealous.
Yes. I really was. I damaged so many relationships like that. I'm surprised by those who stayed my friends to date. But God beat it out of me. You see, I was trying to fill a gap in me, that emotional gap that I hadn't been given. And so I wanted to fill it by having that one person. I wanted him to be mine. Just mine, you're mine, and no one else's. And when you didn't, I felt like you betrayed me. But they never agreed.
And a couple of people feel like that. Most of us have felt like that.
They never agreed to that dynamic. What was I doing to them? But it was a phase for me in high school that God beat it out of me by campus. It was done. But I had destroyed relationships.
I know you're doing a lot of things with the ladies and so many other people that you're impacting their lives. I know you receive a lot of thank you. When you go back home and reflect on the thank you, how do they make you feel like?
I honestly don't reflect on them.
Really?
If you've led long enough, you've learned that people are human. You will never, people are very human. The same people that you feed in the 5,000 are the same people that will be screaming, crucify him. I can guarantee you, all those people who are standing there saying, crucify him, they had eaten that bread in the 5,000, in the 4,000. Maybe the ones whose people came back from the dead, they were not there.
That's nice.
But the people who were there, remember the 5,000 men, I'm sure women were double. So there were probably 12,000 in all those 12,000 shouting there. They were among those ones saying, crucify him. People are human. People are human. And because people are human, that's one thing every leader has to learn. That with people you will forbear. Beyond love, you will learn to forbear. Especially family members, people that are close. There are things that people will take you through and they will do it over and over again. And so you learn that the applause of men is not necessary. And I say this very lightly. Many people are clapping. I like how a certain preacher says it. He says people are clapping for what they can get through you. When I won the VP position, I had more than 1,000 congratulations that night. More than 1,000 congratulations that night. And I was replying, I was texting, I was calling back, I was doing all these things. And I'd gone home that night to my parents' home. And my father looked at me and said, Dana, sleep. Don't respond to those messages. They'll come for a full week to come. Just don't respond. He said also, stop putting your phone on your ear. Answer it live. And so I said, Daddy, you don't understand. People are happy for me. People are congratulating me. And he looked at me and he said, 2 years later, I stood for presidency and lost. I had 3 calls that night.
Wow.
3 calls and no text message.
Wow. That was a good lesson.
People clap for what they can get from you. Everyone associates with success. Everyone associates with platform and pride. Acknowledge it, but let it be water off a duck's back. They don't mean it.
Wow. It reminds me of the story you almost picked up. The story of Jesus and the 5,000 people.
Yeah.
And even the 12 he had his best theory.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good lesson for all leaders.
You need to learn that. When people clap,
True.
don't take it to heart. I mean, I've seen both sides of the coin.
Sounds like you're not even excited about fame.
Not at all. It doesn't move me.
What's your best psalm?
My best?
Psalm.
Psalm 85. There's a portion in Psalm 85. It's my best verse. I think it's verse 10. That says, and let me read it. And heaven kissed the earth. You have to. I fell for that.
I have to read myself.
Psalm 85. I fell for that particular verse because God opened my eyes when I saw it. It says 10, mercy and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. Yeah, that's the NKJV. I like the NIV. It says love and faithfulness met together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. This is the definition of the cross. When I saw it, I saw the cross. Because his love and his faithfulness, they met at the cross. It said righteousness and peace. My right standing with God and my peace with God. To kiss is to have intimate. They kissed each other. It meant the exchange happened at that point.
Can you be a leader and not know God?
It's funny because the Bible says leadership comes from God. And so true leadership and good leadership will always come from God. Your knowledge of him is what will make you great. But it doesn't mean that it's the only place you'll get leadership from. The world, the same way there's worldly wisdom and there's carnal wisdom and all the other wisdom. You can lead in many places. But if you want to be a leader that's impactful and a leader that lives and a leader who touches many, many things, you have to know God.
Council Diana Angwech, this is your camera. I would like you to look there and speak some words of wisdom that speak to the people below you. We are elevating our followers to become leaders and leaders to become agents of change. You are at a point where you are an agent of change. You sit on different boards. You're the Chancellor Church of Uganda. Speak to the leaders and the followers. The difference between you and them, their disciplines, a lot of them involved. But speak to them, a few of them, in 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. If I had to say something to the generation that's coming after me, I would say tomorrow is not a guarantee. Tomorrow is not a promise. But the one thing that can give you grace to see another day is believing that God, who began a good work in you, can bring it into completion. When a diamond is brought out of the ground, it's rough. And that's why you usually hear the saying, a diamond in the rough. But you see, that diamond goes through a process to be refined and to become all that it is. If you ever skip the process, you will be sad that you skipped the process. In fact, the higher you go, it will expose the weaknesses that you have. And so process is important for you as a young leader. It's important for you to understand what your weaknesses are, because if you never conquer those weaknesses, they will be magnified at the top. And leaders who don't learn to tame that inner person, to get rid of that inner person, will always have a very big fall. So embrace the process, embrace the hardships, embrace the refining moments, and allow yourself to be refined by them, so that tomorrow when they are talking about a leader, your name will come to the table. And of course, my heart is tuned towards the women. Get a seat at the table, because only then can you make the difference.
Wow. Wow. You're going somewhere. Believe you me, you're going somewhere. And I'm glad to be part of your journey.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation, Councillor Diana.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for allowing us to sit at your feet and learn together with the people who are watching this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Leaders, that is it what we had for you today in this episode. And please pick what you can learn. Jot down a few things that those are your points that you can run to every time you want to quench or refill yourself. Remember, we learn every day. That is it for today's episode. My name is Simon Chris Makanga, and may the good Lord of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob be with you until we meet in another video. But remember, it's good that you subscribe and also click on that notification bell. Until then, bye-bye.